Hello and welcome to Jennifer Knatters, my knitting and nattering podcast. This is episode 21. Today is the 28th of February, the last day of February. And tonight I have a bit of a hat trick with my yarn. I'll get to that in just a minute. I'd like to apologize for the lighting. Since Catherine has given up her naps, I have been having to sneak out here in the middle of the night to do this. Well, the middle of the night. It's about 10:30 right now. But I've been having to get up after dark to do this. I can't do it during the day. So this is what I have to work with. I'm sorry. So to get to the knitting, I have a finished object. I finished my Clairmore Cowl, and this is by Corina Ferguson. If you see me looking over to the side, that's where my notes are. And this is the Loch colorway. It's Ripples Crafts Merino sportweight. And you can see just how gorgeous those colors are. It's a bit of a feather fan. If you're watching last week, I did mention that the pattern calls for a peacoat bind off. When it came to knit it, I wasn't sure if I had enough yarn. So I went with just a standard bind off. I did not block this particularly well. I washed it. I ran it through a spin cycle in the washing machine, and then I draped it over a radiator to dry so I could wear it right away. But yeah, it definitely needs to be blocked so it doesn't curl up, but I may pull out the bind off and try the peacoat. I mean, even if I just do it most of the way, I think that would be all right, but I think it would look a lot better with the peacoat bind off like the pattern calls for. But either way, it's gorgeous, and if I'm wearing it under a coat, you can't see the edges anyway. It's nice and springy. Yeah, it's got some really lovely colors in there. I don't usually go for these heavily variegated ones. Oop, the light just changed. But it is very pretty and so soft and quite warm because it's a thicker yarn. So yeah, I've got that on, which is useful because it is fairly cold out here. We had unseasonably warm weather last week, and today it kind of went back to our standard this time of year chillier weather. Not even properly cold. It was very cold and misty today, but far cry from a freezing mist, so that was nice. And having finished this, I thought, oh, I should finish some other stuff before I start anything else. And then I realized that that was the wrong approach for me. And using the same yarn, I've cast on a little cardigan for Catherine. So again, this is the Ripples Crafts Sportweight Merino, which she has discontinued. This is the syringa colorway, which is a really delicate lilac purple. You can see a bit of the variegation in the stockinette on the back. I believe a syringa is a flowering tree down in South Africa, which is where she grew up. And Catherine looks really good in pastels and soft colors. I had thought about the Loch. I bought this yarn first, and I've been thinking the Loch with this pattern in mind even, but I decided to go for a semi-solid rather than the variegated, and it's got this pretty little lace repeat. Raglan sleeves, so these are just on a bit of string to hold them while I knit the rest of the body. I've got 2 skeins of this. What I'm planning on doing, the pattern, which is by Froginette Lisa Chemery. I've actually knit, so it's got a little bit of the dip stitches on the back. She calls it an embroidery stitch. So from this point, the pattern says to knit a bit of a skirt, have a bit of a flare out, just in plain stockinette stitch. but Catherine has a long torso proportional to the rest of her body. So I'm going to do a few extra repeats of the embroidery stitch and then knit the sleeves as much as I can with this first skein. I made a ball, which I normally don't do. I got a bit tangled coming off the Swift. Chris came in when I was working on it. He's like, "What did you do?" I'm like, sometimes they just get tangled, and I'm sure I made it worse trying to untangle it. But I wound up just making a ball rather than wind it, so that every time I came to a knot, I could pass the ball through the strands of yarn. And I got about a third the way through winding it up when I got past the bits that were tangled. I tried pulling from both directions, so there was a little bit of tangle at either end. One side was more tangled, and about a third of the way through winding up my ball, I got past it, so that was fine. What I'm planning on doing is knit the body just a little longer. I'm doing the 2-year-old size. When I measured Catherine, she had less than a 20-inch waist, a 20-inch waist over clothes. And the 2-year-old size is sized for a 21-inch waist, which knits up for a finished measurement of 21.75 inches. So she'll have almost 2 inches of ease in the body. And if I make it a little extra long, then as she grows, it'll kind of just get a bit shorter on her. And then it calls for 3/4 length sleeves. So I think I'm going to knit them to be all the way, and then hopefully she'll be able to wear it for a year, maybe even 2, and it'll just get a little shorter. And then, so I'll finish this bit and then leave the body on holders, knit the sleeves, and then whatever I have left can just go into the skirt. And there are knit on button holes, not butter holes, it is butter soft, knit on holes for the button bands, which are here, and the button band, the buttons just go the length of the texture pattern. One thing I really like about this texture pattern, dip stitches seem to be everywhere in my life right now. One thing I like about the texture pattern is it gives a little interest without having a lot of holes. I mean, it does make kind of these small holes, but a lot of visual interest without losing too much warmth. So hopefully this will be a nice layering piece as we transition. Although if it winds up being as warm this summer as it was last summer, or even warmer, because we hardly had any winter at all. I don't think we had more than 2 weeks of particularly cold, icy, snowy weather. If it winds up being really warm, this will be an autumn layering piece. Excuse me. So yeah, I've got this on the needles, which is a nice one. It's working up really quickly. I only cast it on, trying to think if it was Monday or Tuesday. It's not been very long. Today's the 28th, 4 days ago, Monday. So yeah, that's coming along nicely. I told Catherine I was knitting it for her, and she seemed reasonably excited about that. The next one is a project I've been working on since last May. And as you know, last week I said I'd finished finally this lace insert and the pleat, and I had just started working my way up the front with the shoulder decrease, or the underarm decreases. I misread the pattern, and I thought it said to work the decreases 12 times, and it actually was to decrease 12 stitches, which meant I had done far too much, but so I had to rip back, and I've knit past the point I ripped back to, but I hadn't made, considering especially how narrow this section is. I've not made a lot of progress since last I spoke. But this is coming along nicely. This is also knit in Ripples Crafts yarn. This is her Suilven base, which is a 4-ply Merino yak silk blend. And this is the Summer Swim colorway. And it is coming along really nicely. I'm very happy with it so far. So I'll just put that back in its bag. And my final project this week, which I haven't worked on all that much, I think this pink stitch marker was my progress keeper. So I just turned the heel and I've done a little more since then. Finished the decreases. Oh, that stitch marker seems to be where I finished the decreases. And this is my walking around project, and I haven't done a lot of walking around knitting. The little cardigan was small enough that it has been for walking around. And I'm also a little worried that this isn't a dense enough fabric because I can see light through it. I don't know if I can get that on camera. You can kind of see a little that you can see light through, which isn't a great quality in a sock yarn. So I'm thinking this is 2.5. I hope it's not 2.25. I think this is 2.25 millimeter, which I believe is what most people knit regular socks on. I knit them on 2.0. There's not a lot. I mean, I could take it down to 2.0, but that'll be really dense. I'm going to assume it's fine. If they wear through quickly, they knit up quickly, and I can darn them. About half the socks in my sock drawer need darning. I have tried them on. They fit, like the cuff fits well so far. So yeah, I think I'm just going to keep going with that. It should be fine. And as the fabric pulls, it should pull in such a way as to kind of eliminate some of the holes. If it stretches this way, they pull tighter. You don't really, I don't know, rub it the same way. If they pull this way, it tends not to be as good. But I tend not to knit my socks to have so much, I don't like a lot of negative ease in my socks. I like my toes to have lots of room to wiggle. So yeah, these are my socks, and you may have noticed, this is Ripples Crafts Doubly Reliable Sport Weight. The pattern is Rachel Coopey's Bob Socks, which was a free pattern, at least when I downloaded it. And this is Ripples Crafts Doubly Reliable Sock yarn in one of her Storms colorway, one of her non-repeatable colorways. And you may have noticed that all of the projects I have mentioned this week are being knit with Ripples Crafts yarn. This is not a particularly surprising thing to happen in my knitting stash. She is my local yarn dyer. She's one I see at all the local festivals. She does gorgeous colors, great customer service. I consider her a Twitter friend, and yeah, so I should be on commission because I love her yarn so much, and I will certainly knit as this podcast goes on. As long as she continues dying, I will continue buying her yarn and hopefully even getting around to knit with some of it. So yeah, those are my works in progress that I have particularly worked on. On the naughty shelf is the Teardale hat from last week, and I had noticed during the podcast that the snowflake pattern, I'd gotten it wrong and it looked more like tulips on the bottom, and I'd posted a picture on Instagram and then had it cross-posted to my Twitter feed, and my husband couldn't see what the problem was until I showed him the picture sideways, and then he saw it right away. But he says if you can only see it when the picture's sideways and he doesn't plan on just lying dead on the ground, that means you can't see the problem at all, and he would like the hat. So we did try it on. I had taken the needle out, but he tried it on and he didn't think it was too big. So I will finish that off and give it to him at some point. Last week there wasn't a lot of incentive to work on it since it was so warm, but this week it's cold again, and once more one says, hey, nice warm hats would keep my ears warm. So I will finish that for him and he can have it, and then I don't have to feel bad about ripping it out and having the yarn and not having a project and all the other stuff where there was a lot of and I will try not to think weird thoughts about my weird snowflake, because that hat was just not meant to be for me. I'm just gonna, sorry, let me pause the video. I just had a wee bit of a tickle in my throat. So next up, tomorrow, March 1st, is the start of another year of techniques, the Arnold Culliford technique book, knitting book, which is a collaboration of 12 designers and 12 techniques, and probably not 12 yarns, but a variety of yarns used in different ways. And the first project launches tomorrow, and that's the Bremen Cowl, which is the German for blackberry, Brahmin perhaps, and that is the tuck stitch. Nancy Marchant's the designer, and it'll be in the DK Gradient Schopel wool, which is a yarn we used in the first year of techniques. And I really, really liked the colorways and the pattern we knit, which was a really nice cowl. So this will be a smaller cowl using a tuck stitch, which is a brioche variant, and that comes out tomorrow. I'm very excited about that. Over in the Arnold Culliford knitting forum on Ravelry, they have a thread to guess which designers line up with which techniques, and for extra credit, can you guess what wool it will use, what yarn will be used, and what the item will be. So I wrote out the list of designers and the list of techniques. They did another post where they mentioned specifically which brands of yarn they use, though not which yarns they've used, and said for hints you could look in their online shop to see which yarns they carry. So with that information and the list, I made a list of how many of different types of knitted objects were done from the first one, which was one toy, one baby blanket, one child's garment, 2 socks, 2 hand coverings, mitts and mittens, 2 hats, and 3 neck scarf shawls and cowls. And so I made my list of predictions. I would be very surprised if I get more than a third right. If I get a third right, I will feel that I did really well on the guessing. I did guess that Nancy Marchant would be doing the tuck stitch, so I feel I can have that one in my little tick box. I was in the other thread, the general chatter thread, when they released the techniques and the designers. I had matched her up before it was announced, so I do feel that I can have a +1 in my column. I did, I think, assign an item and a yarn to every technique. If I get any of those that haven't already been released as spoilers somewhere, if I get any of them correct, I will be, there's one I think that will be correct. If I get any others, there's one where I'm 90% sure she'll use the yarn. Only one of the designers is male. So yeah, I'm babbling on a fair bit, but I will be very surprised if if I do really well in the guessing, but it's fun to try. So we will find out in August when they release the finished book and the other half of the patterns who got the most right. It will not be me. It will not be me. So that moves us on to family. What we've been up to, and Miss A came to visit. She wound up only being here one full day. Her plane was delayed slightly, so she didn't get here until after basically everyone had gone to bed except me. And then she was here on a Sunday, and we went for a walk in the woods. And Kitten had her watch the My Little Pony movie with her, which isn't a bad movie. It's reasonably entertaining the first time you watch it if you're not 6 years old. If you are 6 years old, it's reasonably entertaining the 100th time you watch it. And towards the end of the movie, Kitten kind of slid. She'd been sat here with Miss Amy, and we've got a telly on the other side of the room, and she kind of oozed over towards the door by the telly and had her little toy ponies and was acting it out rather than even watching it, which was very cute. She used to watch Moana and turn the whole living room into a series of islands and boats and various things, so she could act out that movie along with watching it, which it's cute. It is so cute to watch. We also got to play a board game which I bought on Miss Amy's general recommendation, and I can't remember the name of it. It's the one I got is in German, though fortunately the instructions include an English translation. But it is a game where you play a bunch of little mice, and there's a cat that stalks the board, and you have to see whose mice can collect the most cheese before either the cat makes it around the board twice, or if the cat makes it to your mouse, then you lose those pieces anyway. So you have 2 rotations of the board to collect as much cheese as you can, and you roll the dice, and if you get a number, then you can move one mouse piece up to that many spaces. And if you roll a cat, then you move your piece 1, and you move the cat forward 1 cat space. The first time around the cat moves 1 place, the second time around the cat moves 2 places. And the first time we played, Catherine was playing with Daddy, doing her rolling while sitting in Chris's lap, and the rest of us were playing on our own. And it was pretty much every other roll was coming up a 1 and moving the cat. And so I changed my strategy to, rather than try to get the big pieces of cheese, to just get any cheese, because I figured the cat was going to make it around before anyone had a chance to get to the big cheeses, or certainly before many mice had a chance to get to the big cheeses. And it turns out this was the winning strategy, and Kitten did not lose her little mind at not winning the game, although from what I understand on subsequent games, because I took Catherine to bed at that point, that they played another round and she was somewhat less understanding about not doing the best. But it's a really cute game, and the board's well made, and the little figures are all carved out of wood. They're just adorable. It's really great. And then unfortunately the next day Miss A had to leave before Kitten came home from school again, which I hadn't realized when Kitten left for school. So we had thought that Miss A would be able to go with me to pick her up, but she wound up having to leave for her flight shortly before we did that. But we came home and I distracted Catherine in the sofa bedroom while Kitten just played with the figures. She didn't even play the game. She just played with the little mice figures and the little cat figures and the cheeses and the pictures on the board, and they're really well made. They're very cute. So it was something like Todo Vivos, which to me sounds Spanish, but it is a German edition of the game. So So it's possible you speak German and you know what my words were supposed to be if they were German. I have no idea. So yeah, it was really nice having Miss A visit. It is just a shame it had to be such a lightning visit. Hopefully she'll get a chance to come back and spend more time with us. Other big family news, I have signed Catherine up for nursery. It is finally the week to sign her up for nursery, and that would be starting. All children in Scotland get a paid place for 16 hours of nursery a week during the school term, starting the term after they turn 6 years old, or sorry, 3 years old. My other one's 6 years old, which for Catherine is the next school year. So I have signed her up. They're eligible to start from the point they turn 3, but their paid place is the next term, the next quarter after they turn 3. So we are planning to pay to have her go after she starts 3, because she's ready to spend time and socialize with other kids and all that jazz. So I signed her up. Miss A was here on Monday, and then Tuesday was really, really busy. So Wednesday I finally got a chance to sit down and go through the paperwork, which isn't a lot of paperwork. It's just sign her up and then a copy of the birth certificate and a copy of the council tax to prove that she is eligible, and that she lives in the area, so that they have to let her go to the nursery. And today, Christina brought home from the school a letter saying, "Thank you for applying to attend our nursery. Can you please fill out which hours you would like?" So that they got our name pretty quickly. That's surprisingly nice to see. So we need to fill in the form to say which hours we would like her to attend, and then they will be able to say what hours they can offer her. They have to offer her 16 hours a week. It does not have to be the 16 hours we want it to be. Like there's, the default is that it's 3 hours and like 10 minutes a day to make up 16 across the week. And I would like, because she does gymnastics on Friday currently, and I would like her to continue doing gymnastics. And she will have aged up to a different class, which would mean an earlier class in the day or a later class in the day. The one she does right now basically wraps the 12 o'clock start time for an afternoon session. So if she was early in the morning, we could theoretically go to gymnastics and then take her to nursery after, or do nursery in the morning and get her to gymnastics after. But since we don't have a car, it's not far, but it takes a while to walk. If we had a car, it'd be like a 5-minute drive. Without a car, it's like a 40-minute walk. So yeah, it would be a bit of a rush. At the very least, it would mean we couldn't have a leisurely lunch. She'd have to go in the pram, and I would have to be feeding her in the pram on the way, either to nursery or to gymnastics, to get it all to fit. So we'll submit our hour request. What I'd like her to do is a full day on Tuesday and then have the whole day off on Friday, because every other Tuesday is our house cleaner day. It's the day I have to clean the house, which is easier to do if you don't have a small child underfoot. So yeah, then she could do a full day on Tuesday. I could get the house clean, and then Friday we could do gymnastics. But if it winds up being a straight afternoons, then that's not a huge problem. I would next year like her to do at least the occasional full day, so that she is familiar with the idea of going to school a full day, because I think for Kitten that was the biggest adjustment. Uniforms were a bit of a shock to her system, but having to go the whole day was the bit that was the biggest change. So I don't think Catherine will have a problem wearing uniforms, because I think right now she looks at her big sister and she goes, wow, uniform, you look so grown up, which is what I think when I see her in her uniform, while also thinking, wow, you're so small and so big. And so sometimes you just look at your kids and you're overwhelmed with a wash of like, wow, I love you so much, you're so amazing. And it makes a nice change from all the times when you're like, why won't you listen? Please just do what I said. I will say it was half term last week. I don't think I mentioned this in the last time's podcast. It was half term, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Kitten didn't have school. And while there was a fair bit of yelling, there was also some really, really nice moments. We did some gardening every day. We raked up a bunch of leaves. There's a huge bag of gravel in our front yard. I hadn't known it contained gravel. It's been there for 2 years. I thought it was like cement mix or something, but it's gravel. So I've been refilling the gravel walk that goes near the conservatory around a raised bed in our garden. It's a really pretty area, but it is running very much low on gravel. So I refilled that, and we raked up our very large garden next to all the woods. Means it is a very large garden full of very, very, very many leaves. So I was raking those up and putting them in the beds, and Kitten was a big help with the raking. She helped move piles of leaves around the shrubs for mulch, and she was playing really nicely with her sister, so I didn't have to keep as much attention on Catherine, because Kitten will yell if Catherine makes a run for climbing over the walls or something, which is a thing she has done in the past. She's climbed over the walls, and there was one time I didn't catch her until she was running down the street. She was, I don't know, she was a couple doors down, running down the middle of the street, which is a street, it's not even the busiest street, but there are a lot of learner cars use our neighborhood to practice various driving lessons, and there's a bus route, and people go flying around that corner. She was just running down the middle of the street. She wasn't even 2 at the time. She was 16 months. Ay caramba. So that child is my punishment for being me, really. That classic, may you have a child just like you. I got one. Thanks, Mom, for wishing that upon me. We've got one like Chris, and we've got one like me. So it was Christina, our kitten, was really good help. She also spontaneously cleaned some stuff up on the floor. Catherine accidentally wet herself. She forgot she wasn't wearing a nappy and peed on the floor. And Kitten not only told me about it, but she went to start wiping it up. That was really good help. And then other times Catherine had been playing and made a mess, and Kitten tidied it up when she was done without being asked or anything. She just, Mommy, there's a big mess. And then I have cleaned it up. I'm like, oh wow, so she earned an extra My Little Pony last week when it was half term for being a really good helper, which after the last 7 or 8 months of her being very willful and refusing to help and just very tempestuous, it's nice to have a helpful child again. Catherine is still very much in the stage of anything you do, she wants to help you do. And the difference between a toddler who wants to prove that she belongs in the family by helping everybody out versus a small child who wants to prove she's an individual by doing her own thing at all times and not doing what anyone wants is a very, very marked contrast. So it's nice that some of that headbutting is just finally being outgrown. I've probably jinxed it. Touch, stroke, knock wood. But yeah, it's so nice that she is starting to be more aware of what the family needs, like what she can do to help out around her. So yeah, I mentioned earlier the weather's gone back to being more seasonably Scottish. It was really warm last week. I don't entirely understand it. I mean, obviously it's part of global warming, and aren't we very lucky to live in northern Scotland, those of us who do, because everyone else is having either huge winter storms, or they're having huge summer fires, or they're having both, and we're having gorgeous, gorgeous weather. Really nice weather. Even last winter when it snowed a lot, it was still pleasant snowing a lot. It wasn't like Canada or what's been going on in Chicago where it's just crazy, just absolutely unlivable kind of weather. It has been really nice here in northern Scotland. So if you're looking for a place to flee global warming's knock-on effects, if Scotland manages to get away from the UK and get away from Brexit, this will be a very, very nice place to move to, and Scotland will be looking for people to move here. Scotland would like to have a larger population, and Scotland can be very welcoming. I'm sure it can also be less welcoming, but it can be very, like the head of the government is vocally pro-immigrant. She says that if you want to live here, we want to have you, basically. So yeah, Scotland, it's the place to be. And I think that's as much as I have to say tonight. I stopped the recording halfway through, so I'm not entirely sure how long this one will be. But yeah, I will talk to you next week, and hopefully I will have finished a sock and possibly a small person's jumper and possibly a cowl. Probably not all three, probably not even two of the three, but maybe if we're really lucky, I'll have finished one. The one will not be my large jumper. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I apologize again for the bad lighting, and the good news is, because I do live in northern Scotland, that the bad lighting will be a problem that solves itself, even if I am recording at 11 o'clock at night. So yes, thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you. Bye.